And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Broadcasting live from the Newsmax studio in New York City. A fusion of politics, commentary, entertainment, and sports. Steve and his team bring you the latest news and opinion now. Here is Steve Malzberg.
Hamas and the other terrorist groups like Islamic Jihad are firing from Gaza when their rocketeers and their command posts are embedded in homes, hospitals, next to kindergartens, mosques. And so we're trying to operate to target them surgically. But the difference between us is that we're using missile defense to protect our civilians, and they're using their civilians to protect their missiles. So naturally, they're responsible for all the civilian deaths that occur accidentally. We're sorry for any accidental civilian death, but it's the Hamas that bears complete responsibility.
All right, folks, we're going to have to get out of that soundbite and video. Unfortunately, it was double playing, or whatever you want to call it. Sorry for the technical difficulty. And as promised, joining us now is Ambassador Ido Aharoni, the Consul General of Israel here in New York. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador, for joining us, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me, Steve.
The latest, we keep hearing, that the rockets keep flying from Gaza. Of course, the media likes to call it tit for tat. They like to equate Israel's defense of her land with the attacks by Hamas. We don't do that here on this show, of course. There's talk of a ceasefire. Barack Obama offered to broker a ceasefire. Is that the answer? Wouldn't a ceasefire just basically be another timeout for Hamas to regroup, rearm, and do it again down the road?
There are two aspects here. The first is what you do operationally. The stated goal of this operation, Protective Edge, is to restore calm and quiet and stability to Israel's southern region and also Israel's central region. But there's another aspect here, and that is the context of this conversation. The context of this conversation is not a territorial dispute. We're looking here at a century-old onslaught of the Palestinians against Jewish national sovereignty in the land of Israel. We're looking at an organization that is uncompromising, brutal, in the first place, against its own people.
Well, absolutely. When you hear Benjamin Netanyahu, as he said yesterday, say that the Palestinians use their civilians to protect their rockets as opposed to what Israel does, it's so true. And one has to wonder, where are the bomb shelters for the Palestinians? We know there were 1,000 or more tunnels that they could easily put some people into if they had the desire to do so, but they elect to have the casualties and show the world, hey, look at evil Israel, they're killing our people, when not only do they, in my view, provoke the response from Israel constantly, but they're willing to leave their people in harm's way by using them as shields for missiles or factories or both, and mosques, as same thing, and hospitals and schoolyards. So you're dealing with a kind of a messed up culture.
It's worse than what you just described, Steve. In fact, we have evidence that Hamas is instructing their own people not to comply with Israel's early warning system. And we have two methods that we're using. The first is we actually take the time to call people in their private homes on their cell phones. And then the second thing that we do, we just hand out leaflets announcing in advance that we're going to operate in a certain area and that people are asked to leave. Hamas issued a directive by their so-called Minister of Interior instructing the residents of Gaza not to comply with Israeli early warning, which I think is criminally reckless and irresponsible in the first place for the people of Hamas. But you know what, Steve? It's indicative of the overall approach. This is an organization that does not nurture life. This is an organization that represents an entirely different kind of civilization, as you said.
Yet when I see the Palestinian ambassador on TV yesterday on Face the Nation presenting his side, defending Hamas, accusing Israel, the occupation must end, the rocket attacks are inhumane, and even if there are human shields, it's a war crime to go after a target if there are civilians there. I mean, to try to change the rules of warfare to, hey, as long as we put people there, you can't touch us. I mean, that's insane. But how do you deal with a government that now consists of Hamas? I mean, that they are part of the unity government. The whole landscape has changed fairly recently, has it not?
Yes, and that's why one of the things that we expect the Palestinian National Movement to do, headed by Mahmoud Abbas, known as Abu Mazen, is to break the political alliance formed with Hamas, because you can't say, and by the way, we give him credit for advocating nonviolence. That's a great thing. This was not the case with his predecessor. However, you can't advocate nonviolence and at the same time sign a pact with the terrorist organization. So one of the things that must happen is that this pact should be broken. This should be canceled. And the Palestinian National Authority is expected to distance itself. And by the way, some things are already happening. For example, for the first time we see in many, many years, at least since the 90s, that in some parts of the Gaza Strip, when we announced that we're going to operate militarily in a certain neighborhood, and we asked people to leave their homes, for example, in a place called Beit Lahia, which is in the Gaza Strip, people declined to accept Hamas's directives and actually complied with Israel's request, of their own will. And there are reports of thousands of people that left Beit Lahia because of the information that we provided them with. So that's a sign that even within Gaza itself, Palestinians are beginning to question, what is the logic here of what we're doing? What is the rationale here? What is the end goal? What's Hamas's strategy? What do they want? After all, they do know they cannot destroy the state of Israel with rockets. They can disrupt our lives, as they did, dramatically even, but then there's a price that they're paying. What is it that they want? And of course, we know the answer. The answer is they simply refuse to accept our very right to exist.
The end game here for Israel. I heard that you echoed just at the beginning the sentiments of the Prime Minister yesterday to restore peace or calm or quiet, whatever you said. There are some on the right, even within the government of Israel, that says that's not enough. You must finish off Hamas. I understand the tough logistics with the civilian population, the extreme overcrowdedness of Gaza, etc. But is it enough? There were a lot of people disappointed that you guys didn't finish off Hezbollah in the last war against Hezbollah, and then they're going to live to fight again as well. Can you destroy or deplete Hamas to the point where they're not going to bother you for a long, long time, or is that not the goal?
Well, theoretically speaking, in terms of Israel's military might, in terms of Israel's operational
you could do whatever you want.
We could level
Right.
the whole area. That's not the question. The question is, can it be done from a political point of view? The Israeli cabinet, which is Israel's commander-in-chief, is comprised of several elements. Each element has its own agenda, each element has its own constituency, and has its own leader. And obviously the decisions that the cabinet produces at the end are always a result of this discussion between the various factions that comprise the cabinet. So what we do know is this. As you said correctly, there are voices within the Israeli political system that call for going what's called a massive, comprehensive ground operation. But even they say we should go in, get the job done, and get out.
Right. Nobody wants to occupy Gaza.
Nobody wants to occupy Gaza long term, because this has tremendous implications for the state of Israel. The second group says this is not the time to do it now. They have all sorts of considerations. Are we willing to pay the price in life? Are we willing to engage ourselves into in this very long operation? This may last 3 or 4 months. Are we willing to engage in this the debate with the world? What's going to happen? And so on and so forth. So like anything in Israeli politics, the outcome will be a result of a lively discussion.
Ceasefire, is that something you'd be interested in the U.S. brokering? I know Kerry's going to the area supposedly tomorrow. Are you interested in a ceasefire now?
Well, as the Prime Minister said, and he said it very clearly, what we want is quiet and calm in the South. If this could be achieved then the Prime Minister said,
Including
we
the
were,
ceasefire.
of course,
Yeah,
the Hamas made the decision to escalate. This conflict was actually imposed on us by Hamas. We did not start firing rockets.
Let me ask you, I know Israel arrested or charged the three Jewish members of Israel, countrymen of Israel, with the death of the Palestinian. Where are we in finding the perpetrators who killed the three Israeli teenagers? And who's responsible for finding? Is it the PA? Is it Israel in conjunction with the PA?
The overriding responsibility for security when it comes to Israeli concerns, of course, lies within the authority of the State of Israel and the Israel Defense Forces, which is the ruler and
Right.
the parts under Israeli control.
We only have a minute. I just want to let you know we only have a minute. Go ahead.
We know who did it. We know who they are. We've known
Specifically, not just Hamas, but specifically.
We know their names.
Okay.
We know who they are. We
So
have their
tell me
pictures.
what's hampering you from getting them?
Well, they're hiding somewhere, and we don't know where they are, but we'll find them. We'll bring
With the
them
help
to
of the
justice.
Palestinian Authority or without?
With the help, it would be better. If without, we can make it too. We can find them, but we know exactly who they are. We know which families they come from. We know that they come from a very well-established, well-connected family within Hamas circles, and there's no doubt in our minds that they were operating in the spirit of Hamas, if not under a general directive issued by Hamas.
Mr. Ambassador, thank you very much. I hope you'll come back, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. All right, folks, we will continue with retired Major General Paul Vallely and talk about the return of Sergeant Bagdal to active duty. How's that possible? We'll talk about it right here on the Steve Malzberg Show, Newsmax Television.